So are you picking up what these competitors are putting down? Hey everybody, welcome to After Action Report, your recap show for all Schmeta matches to keep you caught up on all the action. I am your host Megs here for the Call to Action podcast channel, giving you all the stats, all the storylines from the latest episode of Friday Night Titans, episode 16. And in this episode, we saw a number one contender match for a teams division, the possible next step for a couple IG competitors, and we saw a competitor being picked up by a faction you may or may not have seen coming. So without further ado, let's jump right into the episode. In our first scene, we see Brandon the Hornet Hannah and William the Beast Bibiani talking about a piece of art that Hannah had created. In comes Rick the Rage Aratus and Brother Lomas to challenge Hannah to an IG match against Brother Lomas. So right off the bat, there was a lot going on in this scene with the back and forth banter between Hannah and Bibiani, which was a lot of fun, very much in the quirky Merc style. And you contrast that with what Rager and Lomas were doing, coming in, Lomas thinking he's going to save Brandon Hannah's soul, and Hannah not understanding why he feels he needs saving. He feels perfectly fine there with the Mercs, but Lomas is adamant, and he is going to come in and teach Hannah a lesson and try and rescue him from his plight. Now, talking about the competitors themselves, Brother Lomas is coming off of a knockout against Elena Jordan earlier in the season, so he's coming off a big victory there. But Brandon Hannah has been in the IG division since 2019. And while he has been in talks for being a number one contender and has played for a number one contender shot, he hasn't quite broken into that tier of competitor just yet. So on paper, this sets up a very interesting match with Hannah just now at 5-5 in his IG career, looking to break into that next tier of competitor to put himself again in that possible title talk. And then you have Brother Lomas, who's trying to cement a career of his own inside the IG division by taking out one of the established bests inside this league. Before we get into this match, however, we see King Arthur has been trying to reach Gucci with no luck. Feeling slighted by him, they decided to become a sovereign nation and go against Danger Zone without a manager. So this is the first time that we are seeing King Arthur in this season, and it appears that they have had enough of Gucci's antics and not showing up, and they are appearing to be taking a step away from the FinStock Exchange and will be facing off against Danger Zone on their own without a manager. Now, King Arthur's last match was a title match against Shazam, which they lost at Spectacular after running through a team tournament in the very end of the year. But let's not also forget the fact that their opponents, Danger Zone, ran through another team tournament at the very beginning of last season. And while you may disagree with the means in which they've done it, they have maneuvered themselves into a position to where they are now in a number one contender match that will possibly get them a shot for a title. But before we get to that match, we're going to do our undercard, which is Brandon the Hornet Hannah against Brother Lomas. Coming out of round one, Hannah is up by 3, 9-6. Coming into round two, Hannah elects to spin first, takes a wild card on the first spin. It's spinner's choice, and he ends up taking Jurassic Park. Comes away with 7 out of 10 points, checking down and missing one question on multiple choice, and it is stolen for 1 point. Brother Lomas spins away from Heroes and Villains and ends up taking Marvel. Comes away with 6 out of 10 points, checking down to multiple choice twice, misses a question for 2 points, and it is stolen, which this does give Brandon a gain of 2 points to now be up by 5, 18-13. In round 3, Lomas hits his 2-pointer in X-Men, misses a 3-pointer in Spider-Man, but then hits a 5-pointer in Planet of the Apes, forcing Hannah to hit a 2-pointer in Alien Predator, ties the game at 20, and then proceeds to miss a 3-pointer in DC and also misses a 5-pointer in Animated. So we're still tied, and that means we're going to sudden death, where both Hannah and Lomas hit the first 2 questions, but Lomas misses question number 3, which gives Hannah the win with a final score of 23-22, where Brandon Hannah answered 18 of 22 questions for 82% accuracy and scored 64% of 36 available points. Brother Lomas answered 15 of 22 questions for 68% accuracy and scored 63% of 35 available points. So both of these competitors definitely struggled there in that late third round, which ends up pushing us into sudden death. This is now the second time that Hannah has been pushed into sudden death, though we didn't go quite as deep as the match that he had against Zipper early last season that went well into sudden death. We didn't have to go quite this far. But you saw Hannah's experience come into play when you talk about round 1, where he was able to recover from an early miss there. But Lomas was definitely no slouch either, because he gutted his way out and kept fighting, forcing Hannah's hand in that round 3, which did ultimately lead them to sudden death. And while Lomas was not able to come out on top here, I think he's definitely still going to be someone to keep an eye out for in the division, as he is now 1-1. But Hannah's also making a statement here by saying he can still gut it out and he can still bring out those wins. So time will tell what both of these competitors will do further along into the season. So this brings us to the middle portion of the event, and we jump right back in after our break with our main event. King Arthur facing off against Danger Zone in a number 1 contender match. Before we jump into what happened with the questions, let's talk a little bit what happened with the individual players during the match itself. Before the match even starts, Griffey Nooms is insisting that everyone bow before the king, further emphasizing the idea that they see themselves as the sovereign nation above the rest of the league, which, of course, Danger Zone does not oblige in, and Danger Zone continues to badger King Arthur throughout the match, through round 1 into round 2, where finally, after all the chaos and all the madness that happened in last week's episode, I talked about how I was surprised that Ben Bateman did not get an official warning in his match against Kalinowski. Finally, here in Danger Zone's match, Mark Ellis calls an official warning on Danger Zone before King Arthur starts their round 2 questions. That kind of slows down the trash talk, but not really, because even when we get into round 3, Bateman's still pushing the envelope and asks what happens if he gets another warning inside the match, which he knows the rules, he knows what's going to happen. But you, again, are further seeing that the boss is still knowing how to push everybody's buttons, including those on the desk. And poor Andrew Guy, trying to be impartial, but still feeling the sting of what happened between him, Ben, and Dan earlier in the season. But for the match itself, coming out of round 1, they are tied at 20, with Nooms and Merle both going perfect, plus the bonus, and Khan and Bateman coming away with 9 points. As the higher-ranked team, King Arthur elects to spin first. They spin away from a wild card, end up taking another wild card, and it ends up being opponent's choice, and they are given the Hepburns by Danger Zone. King Arthur comes away with 8 out of 10 points. Checking down to multiple choice one time misses that question, and it is stolen for 1 point. On Danger Zone spin, they take Alfred Hitchcock on the first spin. They also come away with 8 out of 10 points, but they miss one question for the full 2 points, and it is stolen by King Arthur. This gives them a gain of 1 to where King Arthur is up by 1, 30-29. And it is a back and forth here in round 3. Bateman hits his 2-pointer in Marvel. Nooms hits a 2-pointer in Coming of Age. Back over to Merle, who hits a 3-pointer in Mystery and Thriller. Khan hits their 3-pointer in the 1950s. And this is forcing Danger Zone to answer a 5-pointer in the 1960s, which they miss. And this gives King Arthur the win with a final score of 35-34, where King Arthur answered 27 of 29 questions for 93% accuracy and scored 90% of 39 available points. Danger Zone answered 27 of 30 questions for 90% accuracy and scored 79% of 43 available points. So a couple things happened during the course of this match that allowed King Arthur to come away with this win. First off, they were tied coming out of round 1, which any number of things could have changed that outcome. But specifically in round 2, they both come away with the same number of points on their own questions, but it was those steal opportunities. King Arthur only left a 1-point steal opportunity, while Danger Zone gambled for the full 2 points, missed an opportunity, and King Arthur swooped in and picked up that opportunity to allow them to be ahead heading into the final round. And then ultimately, with Danger Zone missing their 5-pointer, it did not force King Arthur to have to answer their 5-pointer in order to win the match. And it is officially stated during the post-match that they are intending to walk away from the Finstock Exchange and go rogue for the remainder of the season. But there's more on that coming in just a little bit. But Something else happened during this match, also in the post game, because Danger Zone, during their post match interview, announced that Kate will be picking up yet another competitor from the dungeon that was dropped, Robert the Spider Parker. Yes, the IG phenom from the past 2 seasons is back, and he will be playing for the Den coming into the rest of the season so far. And we're going to see some of the drama from that announcement right here on this first cutscene. After all the interviews are done, Kate and Parker are approached by Smets and Kaiser, where Parker announces that he is done being in Smets' shadows and is coming for the belt. So I remember making note of the moment at Spectacular that Parker was alluding to. As soon as the Smasher came back, it appeared that Kaiser was all back in with his boy. But I wondered if maybe Kaiser was going to be able to juggle having 2 top IG competitors on his faction with being able to keep Parker and Smets both. But it appears Parker made that decision for him by leaving Kaiser and joining up with Kate and the rest of the Den. So time will tell what kind of rivalry that brings about, but it seems like Kaiser and the Den are just bound to collide at every turn. In our final scene before we sign off, the Barbarian comes and pleads with King Arthur to stay on the exchange and does convince Khan to manage him in his match that is upcoming against Brandon Hanna. So we find out from Barbarian in this scene that Gucci is absent because he is out on a mission for the exchange, and we also know that upcoming we have the Barbarian facing off against Brandon Hanna. We don't know for sure whether this is going to be singles or IG. I would suspect that likely it is IG, but we don't quite know when that match is going to be coming up. But we do know that next week's episode will be the title match between Shazam and King Arthur. And we also will see an IG match for Robert Parker during next week's episode as well. That is the proposed card for next week, but you never know what's going to happen when it comes to Friday Night Titans, so I'd stay tuned. And that is going to do it for this week's episode. But don't worry, I'm going to be right back here next week covering the next Friday Night Titans. Before you leave, make sure you have hit like on the video, you're subscribed to the channel, and you are leaving comments. All the match breakdowns I present here will be posted to Twitter and Facebook. Until next time, for the entire Call to Action podcast crew, I'm your host, Megs, and this is After Action Report, signing off.